Hello everyone. I'm a distributor, so it's quite interesting to come to the conversation with this fantastic information from the front end of putting the projects together, because distribution very much, you know, from you think, okay, it's a sales and marketing thing, it's the end of the line. But as Sharon was mentioning, there's quite a lot of change in traditional distribution models and quite a lot of ways to think outside the square. And interestingly, when you're thinking about commercialising a project now, sometimes looking at what you can do at the back end can help and leverage things at the front end. It's interesting because as you know, working at Southern Star and things for that many years ago, obviously a lot of our content was this big high-end drama and big, you know, the big budgets, and with the use of the government agencies. Then as Verve, I worked with a number of really small independent startup producers that just didn't have projects that were at that scope. So, you know, we worked very much in an independent type of realm where quite often their budgets were really very little. So, you know, we could actually get pre-sales and get sort of try and find ways in the market where they didn't even tap into the government funding at all, and try and work things through. So I've got a couple of examples of that. I think what's interesting too to consider about distribution offering some elements that can help in the financing plan is that particularly with some smaller distributors, not necessarily the big international, big 5, big 50, however, but you know, with some smaller ones, you've got to remember also that content is so key to distributors. So having distributors' main thing is to keep filling up their slate with new content every time. It's a lot to keep that constant flow through. So I think in response to your question, there's some distributors also that want to partner with new talent regularly to keep bringing that flow in. And once you've been successful, once you've got a few runs on the board, they actually can nurture you in a way that they want to, and they will throw their whole sort of commercial strength behind it. Some distributors won't present projects at concept stage or in development stage. I did for years. I put out so much stuff on spec for years and years to international broadcasters at the markets, because they wanted to see, we were in a unique position where they wanted to see what else we were going to come with, what else was out there that they weren't going to find in another way. And in that case, there's, you know, if you can partner and mentor again with people like that can actually help you tap into some other little bits and pieces is quite advantageous. One thing to remember about financing plan, I guess, too, is at the end of the day, the absolute holy grail is to have broadcaster investment into your project. Whether they commission it, acquire it, the eventual aim is to have it on their screen. So considering the commercial elements of what's going to happen at the end of the day is also quite interesting. If it's possible at all during your production process to consider international interest, whether your project does stand up for international interest, whether you've got talking heads, whether it can be subtitled, whether it can be dubbed, all those sorts of things, whether you can actually produce an international version at the same time as you're doing a domestic version. Because if you get the domestic pre-sale, that's terrific, but sometimes if it's a real domestic project, you don't have a chance to get that international revenue, which is then how you recoup a lot to the private investors and things like that. So those sorts of creative questions are really quite pertinent early on. I thought it would be interesting to have a look at the tier of possible scenarios. You're probably all very aware of this, but I just want to go through it quickly. The commission is obviously the holy grail, as we mentioned. The broadcaster investment that can be 100%, can be 50%, can be of sort of different levels. Obviously has a position in, you know, with a straight out commission, it can and cannot have equity impact, different every time. A pre-sale is the broadcaster investment, a financial commitment prior to production. This is a domestic pre-sale or an international pre-sale. It's not as high as a whole commission. It can again vary in very different amounts of percentages. And timing of that, and timing of how you keep all these pieces of the puzzle together is kind of a beautiful dance. An acquisition is the broadcaster investment once the show is completed and produced. So that's not as high again. And I'm actually going to go through a revenue projection from a distributor's point of view in a moment, because I think that's one of the biggest changes also, is that licence fees out there are just nowhere near what they used to be. You know, you used to get $50,000 an hour in Japan. You can't anymore. You know, it's so very different what you can actually make out of the back end of the project, that finding different ways to fund it at the beginning mean that if you get in a position where your distribution is cream, to recoup you're in a much better position, and I think that's the biggest jump for me in the traditional model where distributors would be paying a DG, so a distribution guarantee, and some do, some don't, some's high, some's not, but if it's the license fees that broadcasters pay once it's finished, and how you actually recoup on it is a lot more challenging than it ever was. Your acquisition revenue is how you recoup your monies to pay back your private investment or make your more to the point, to make your profit. So I might just have a look at the revenue projections actually. If you've got a really good relationship with the distributor, or they're pitching for your concept, so again, it depends at that point on whether it's, you've got to decide, you've got to share a bit of your idea if it's really great, and that's the really important thing about the stages as well. Have your pitch so darn spot on that they know exactly what it's about, and they know if they want it or not, because if they want it, they'll help you in different ways. And revenue projections are, thanks Ken, I've actually got it on another page that I might just see if that's okay, thank you. So we used to get asked to do these all the time. I have a few different templates of different sorts of genre of programming. This is a high-end lifestyle product one. Revenue projections from a distributor tend to be a revenue projection for best case, mid-range and low case, or worst case.
And they're also called take prices.
Take prices.
Yeah.
Now don't necessarily look at these license fees. These change according to what sort of project it is and things like that, and timing. This is quite an old template also. So, but so you go through all the territories, you see what you've got. This is just a sales acquisition fee revenue projection, not a commission. So then down the bottom, if you click, we can through down the bottom. Thank you. So you start looking at all the territories, best case, worst case, and there's a lot of this. These prices for the content that Verve had, we had a lot of stuff that just hit pay TV type of level, and they were small budgets, and then you start to go down a bit further down, please. Thank you. Down. And then you start to look at the commercial revenue projection in US dollars, total in Aussie dollars with the correct currency exchange, and good revenue projections also. This is a very simplistic version. We also have another more complicated version which looks at the timing and the time frame of that as well, because you've got to think it could be the life of the project. You've got to think about levels of investment, when they need to recoup by, so, and considering all the tiering of the rights, which is when a good distributor comes into its own, really. Thank you.
And can I just ask you, Victoria, when you're thinking about it, what do you tend to go for the middle, or do you tend to go for the low?
Middle to low.
You wouldn't ever go high.
No way. And I would always do my rev projections so conservatively too, because as soon as they see the high end, it's like, that's what we're going to get.
Yeah.
And it's just not.
No.
And it's really, really hard to do that. I used to feel much more confident about doing it when the license fees were stronger, but it's hard because you're forecasting on someone's absolute
passion
of what they're trying to do at the end of the day and how many broadcasters it's going to make, and then they see that and they're like, okay, when are you going to deliver all this? So it's a tricky one. In terms of the distribution guarantee, I think there was a level, it was 10,000 up there, wasn't it? I remember in the days way back when Southern Star used to put up, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
200.
In some cases, sometimes they would put that up because they knew they had an international sale on a series they had to keep delivering on, and that was actually the international deal was making the production keep going and all sorts of things. One of the other terms that we coined in our foray into all of this with our producers is, and that was one of the things I sort of put down, is in terms of working out your budget in the first place, and when you're at high-end, high-level projects like these ones, and they're big dramas and they're big budget things, some of my producers, this was more in the sort of lifestyle genre and contemporary entertainment sort of thing, but they may have been making things for, they really could have done it at a push at 70,000 a half hour. Have a couple of budgets. If you're doing that sort of thing with your project, it's always a question for us, well, what do? How do you put that as your budget, what you want, to a commissioning broadcaster? Do you tell them what it's really going to cost and they think it's too lowball, or do you make it up and make it a bit higher? So you have a couple of budgets up your sleeve if it's that type of sort of lower budget, lower end type of product, not lower end, but just lower budget sort of. And one of the phrases we coined actually was acquisitions. We used to do that a lot with our international broadcasts, particularly with the UK, because the currency exchange at the time was so fantastic that if we secured a pre-sale in the UK for one of our projects where actually their budget was 50,000-60,000 in pounds, they were doing it as their acquisition license fee was enough to get it commissioned for us. So we had a couple of projects that happened through that was just like, oh yeah, so we had that acquisition. An interesting thing about the international pre-sale also is the domestic proof of concept. That's really important, and as Trish was mentioning, that proof of concept, the domestic pre-sale triggered all the rest. So too with an international pre-sale, and they're hefty from France, Germany, the UK. They're quite significant, and you'll see the same broadcasters regularly are the international pre-sale type of broadcasters. The timing of that is obviously really important, and quite often proof of concept domestically will trigger that, or they won't pick it up necessarily unless they know that the domestic broadcaster's on board.